Hey everyone. So in Iran today, the top headline in the regime media, in both of the major regime media outlets that I often look at, WANA, which is more of the government's official media outlet, and as well as Tasnim, which is the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' media outlet, tends to be more hardline, more like a ticker, less analysis. But those are really the two mouthpieces of the Iranian regime. In both of them, the top headline today is not the ceasefire. It's not. The top headline is that today marks 40 days since Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed on the first day of this war. And in this video, we're going to get into what that means and what it means politically for the decision of President Trump of the United States to go to this ceasefire agreement on the particular date that they did. And I'm going to argue in this video that this might have been a mistake, and it'll become clear why. So let's get right into this interesting story here. We're going to learn a lot in this video. So here we have, this is the top story in WANA today. Okay, you can see here it is, top story, top news. Massive public turnout on the 40th day after the assassination of Iran's leader. So here we go. Let's read through this piece. Commemoration ceremonies marking the 40th day after the martyrdom of Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, the leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution, are being held on Thursday, April 9th, with widespread public participation in Tehran and simultaneously in cities across the country. The event, held 40 days after his death in a targeted attack attributed to the United States and Israel, has become one of the largest mourning gatherings in recent weeks. The ceremony symbolically began at 9:40 a.m., coinciding with the exact time of the assassination, and is scheduled to continue until 8 p.m., all day long. In Tehran, mourning processions started early in the morning from various routes, especially from Engelab Square, moving toward the site of the assassination. Meanwhile, since last night, April 8th, religious groups and mourning assemblies had already begun moving after the evening prayers from mosques and religious halls toward main squares and designated mourning locations. Field observations indicate that a considerable number of people had gathered at designated locations even before the official start of the ceremony, and the number of participants has continued to increase over time. The central streets of the capital, especially those leading to the site of the assassination, have been filled with mourners chanting elegies and performing religious rituals to honor the memory of the former leader of the Islamic Republic. At the same time, reports indicate that similar ceremonies are being held across the country. In many cities, mourning processions have taken to the streets and religious centers to perform Arba'in rituals. Arba'in is the 40th day after death, with some areas witnessing large public gatherings. As part of today's programs, a prayer for the well-being of Imam Mahdi, that's the hidden imam, that's their Messiah figure that they're waiting to come save the world when it's brought to the point of apocalypse. So as part of today's programs, a prayer for the well-being of Imam Mahdi, may God hasten his reappearance, will be recited nationwide at 9 p.m., accompanied by a recorded voice of the late leader, Khamenei. Additionally, according to official announcements, further memorial ceremonies are scheduled for Friday, April 10th, starting at 10 a.m. in large prayer grounds across the country. Ayatollah Khamenei was killed approximately 40 days ago in a targeted attack in Tehran, an incident that occurred at his location and immediately triggered widespread domestic and international reactions. The United States and Israel have been identified as the perpetrators of the attack, which marked the beginning of a war imposed on Iran that lasted for 40 days. You notice the emphasis on 40 days. We'll get into this all very soon. It's very important. The assassination of Iran's leader, as an unprecedented event, has generated widespread reactions across the region and the world, and has been described by many analysts as a turning point in the geopolitical developments of the Middle East. Holding Arba'in ceremonies for the former leader of the Islamic Republic within the framework of the Arba'in religious tradition is seen as an effort to redefine this event as a historical ideological moment. This is a key sentence here, okay? They're redefining this event as a historical ideological moment. Within this context, the large public turnout in today's ceremonies has been presented by organizers as a sign of continued popular support and a renewed pledge of allegiance to the political and ideological path of the system. Very interesting closing line. Let's read that again. The large public turnout is seen as popular support and a renewed pledge of allegiance to the political and ideological path of the system, of the regime. Okay, so that's in Wana. And then in Tasnim, we have two stories here. We have one story from today. I'm sorry, from yesterday. Let's start with yesterday's story. Iran armed forces declare victory. Iran armed forces declare victory after U.S.-Israeli enemies are forced to surrender. Okay, so this has to do with how they view the ceasefire. I'm going to make a separate video about the Iran regime media's view of the ceasefire because it's fascinating. There's a lot of articles about the ceasefire. I'm going to make a separate video about that. But this one talks about the 40 days as well. Check it out. So it shows a big picture of this massive military ceremony. Who knows when that's actually from? The General Staff of Iranian Armed Forces and the Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters of Iran said 40 days of steadfast resistance and courageous military efforts compelled the U.S. and Israeli forces to accept Iran's terms and ultimately submit to its demands. Okay, so it mentioned in a joint statement released on Wednesday, the General Staff of the Iranian Armed Forces and the Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters stated that after 40 days of steadfastness, resistance, and the conscious presence of the people in the arena, along with the relentless struggle of the brave military forces against the blatant and unlawful aggression of the American Zionist enemies, they were ultimately compelled to accept the terms proposed by Iran and submit to them. So this was a victory for Iran. Okay, we'll jump ahead here. With each passing day of the war, the American and Zionist enemies faced increasingly heavy and crushing blows, new surprises as the scope of the conflict expanded across the region. That's what their statement said. And yeah, okay. And then we have this from today. Iran commemorates 40th day of leaders' martyrdom, vows unyielding resistance. This one has a lot of photos in it. And the caption on this photo is millions of Iranians flooded the streets across the nation and on Thursday, marking the 40th day since the martyrdom of the leader of Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, elite commanders, and the children of Minab, victims of a brutal U.S.-Israeli terrorist onslaught on February 28th. The Tehran processions, beginning at Jamhuri Square and culminating at the site of the leader's assassination, became a roaring declaration of allegiance to his revolutionary path and a condemnation of enemy atrocities. The solemn processions in Tehran began at Jamhuri Square and extended to the site of Ayatollah Khamenei's assassination. They already said that. Featured mourners chanting slogans, reciting elegies, and reaffirming their allegiance to his revolutionary ideals. And then they show a bunch of pictures of these people. The unprovoked aggression by the United States and the Israeli regime targeted not only Iran's leadership, but also its civilian infrastructure, including a devastating strike on a primary school that claimed the lives of 170 civilians, mostly children. In response, Iran's armed forces launched 100 waves of retaliatory missile and drone strikes against Israeli-occupied territories, that's the state of Israel, like Tel Aviv, and U.S. regional assets, forcing the enemy into a humiliating retreat. A Pakistan-brokered ceasefire agreed upon after the U.S. accepted Iran's 10-point proposal was announced by the Supreme National Security Council on Wednesday, marking a temporary halt to hostilities. Here we go. The IRGC declared in a statement that Ayatollah Khamenei's martyrdom had strengthened the Islamic Revolution as profoundly as his lifetime leadership, citing the nation's unity, resistance, and the 100 fatal blows dealt to enemy forces as divine blessings of his sacrifice. His legacy, a comprehensive system of resistance, independence, justice, and spirituality, remains the guiding framework for Iran's governance, the IRGC affirmed. As the ceremonies continue until nightfall, the Iranian people stand resolute, their grief transformed into unshakable defiance against oppression and foreign aggression. And then there's more pictures, and that is the end of the article. Okay, great. Now, what does all this mean? So before we move on, I just want to put in a little plug for a project that I'm involved with. This is a really important project, by the way. Every day there are lies about Israel that are spread online. We know that, and it's faster than the truth can catch up. And if you watch this channel, you probably know that I was good friends with Charlie Kirk, and Charlie saw this problem very clearly, and he had written a letter. It became pretty famous. You might have heard about it. He wrote a letter to Prime Minister Netanyahu giving him advice about what Israel needs to do to put out better messaging. And he suggested the creation of something called the Israel Truth Network. That was the name he came up with it, which would be a kind of clearinghouse with easy to access information addressing the key lies being told about Israel in the headlines, but also with a lot of, with an archive and resources. And before he was murdered, he and the team at Israel 365, we started building a solution, and Charlie was kind of advising us on it, and his plan was to promote it as well. And we started building the Israel Truth Network, and we finally got it up and running. It's a rapid response system that delivers clear, accurate, user-friendly content straight to people who can use it. So please visit the Israel Truth Network. That's with a the at the beginning of it, theisraeltruthnetwork.org. And you can sign up. You see in the top corner there, you can sign up for the daily briefs, and you can join the fight for truth. So please go ahead and take part in that. Very important, the Israel Truth Network. Okay, great. Okay, so how do we understand this whole phenomenon of the 40 days, what we just saw here? Okay, what does all this really mean? So to really understand what you heard in the articles that I just read, you need to understand something very deep about the Shiite religion and history and culture. The 40th day after a death, what's called Arba'in, is not just a memorial. Okay, it's the moment when the mourning for 40 days is now given meaning. Okay, so it's been 40 days we've been sad and mourning, and now the whole theme of it in their faith is that now you take it to the next level, you give it more meaning. In Iran, this is often the moment when that turns into real action. Okay, and there's a lot of historical precedent for this. We'll get to that soon. But this all goes back to the foundational story of Shiite Islam and the killing of the founder of Shiite Islam, Imam Hussein, at Karbala. So here's what that story is actually about. In the year 680, Hussein, who was the grandson of Muhammad, he refused to pledge allegiance to the Umayyad ruler Yazid. He saw him as corrupt and illegitimate. So he set out from Mecca with a small group, family members, loyal followers, and he headed toward a place called Kufa, okay, where he believed that he had support there, but the support never came. Instead, he was surrounded in the desert of Karbala by a much larger army. He was cut off, he was outnumbered, and he, of course, knew exactly how it was going to end. On the 10th day of the month of Muharram, Hussein and his small band of fighters were killed. Okay, his companions were all slaughtered. His infant son was killed, and the women and children were taken captive. Hussein himself was beheaded. This is the founder. This is the person who Shiites view as the founder of their branch of Islam. So in Shiite memory, this is a defining moral drama in their history, basically. He was this righteous man standing almost alone, choosing death rather than submission to tyranny. That's how they interpret it. So, and I can't stress this enough. This is the event that shaped Shiite identity. Okay, so meaning the Shiites were born out of a civil war within Islam. And that's why there's still, many centuries later, this all-out hostility, between Shiites and Sunnis. It all goes back to this event, okay? For all generations afterwards, there's this belief among Shiites that faithfulness to God means resisting illegitimate power, even in the face of certain death. Let Let me say that again because of the moment we're in now politically. For Shiites, a big defining moment in the creation of their entire branch of Islam, which is really a different religion in many ways, is like the key value of the key defining character of your faithfulness to God is that you resist illegitimate power even in the face of certain death. Okay? Which is why, by the way, there was never any chance that Khamenei was going to flee Iran and go try to, make a better life for himself somewhere, like you see other dictators whose regimes are falling do, where they flee. He was never going to flee. He's a true believer. He was choosing martyrdom, and that's the highest thing for them. Now, 40 days after Hussein was killed back in 680. 40 days after he was killed, his followers returned to his grave. And when they returned to his grave, they declared that his death was not the end of the story, but that it was the beginning of a permanent call to action, an obligation to remember and to call out injustice and to stand against it no matter what the cost. And that's what Arba'in is. Okay, so Arba'in is it's the 40th day. So it's not for them, for Shiite Muslims, the 40th day after mourning is not closure, which you have, for example, in Judaism at the end of the 7 days of Shiva and then the 30 days of Shloshim, they're stages of mourning, and each one has a kind of closure to it. But that's not what Arba'in is. It's not closure. It's taking the mourning and moving it to another level. It's kind of giving it meaning. Okay, and for people in the West, they don't know this, and this is a theme I've been touching on since even before the war started, that one big problem that the West has in dealing with Iran is that they just don't know enough about what these people believe. And that's why, when Trump says, for example, that he was shocked that Iran started firing missiles at all of its neighboring countries, no one expected that. What do you mean no one expected that? These are 12 Shiite Muslims. They're surrounded by Sunnis who are allied with their enemies. And they believe that bringing the apocalypse is the way to bring the Mahdi and to bring perfection to the world. Of course they were going to do that. Anyway, I digress. Let's get back to this story here. So for Iran, this 40-day thing is part of like their like ideological muscle memory, right? It's how they think. It's how they view the world. Now, going back to 1979, when the Islamic Revolution took over, when the revolution happened and this Ayatollah regime came to power, this 40-day Arba'in thing was very prominent as a factor, as a political factor in the revolution, in the lead up to the fall of the Shah. Here's the way it would work. They'd be protesting, meaning the Shiite fanatics would be protesting. Someone would get killed in a protest. 40 days later, there would be a gathering, a mass gathering to mark Arba'in for this martyr who died in the protest. And that gathering, like the original Arba'in, which is where they gathered at Hussein's grave to commit themselves to the idea that the death is not in vain and it's a call to action, to drive forward, to fight more. That's what would happen at these gatherings in 1979, where the Arba'in gathering of a protester who was killed would turn into a larger protest, and it would get more violent, more people would be killed, and then 40 days later, this would all happen again, and it would escalate. Okay, this is what actually happened in 1979. It happened over and over. So there was like this rolling wave of protests. It was almost like a rhythm every 40 days. Death, mourning, Arba'in events, which would mobilize people more, which would lead to more death, etc. Okay, so this is really part of the culture of the whole Iranian revolution, and it's still happening now. That 40-day concept is embedded in how large parts of Shiite society process this whole, it's like an identity thing. So Ali Khamenei gets killed, and now it's 40 days later. So let's go back to what we just saw in those media reports that I read to you. You have massive crowds gathering on the 40th day after the killing of Iran's supreme leader. And at the exact same time, these official declarations of victory over the United States and Israel. And the timing could not be more perfect for them. Think about that. This ceasefire comes into effect basically on the 40th day. In the Shiite framework, the 40th day is where the story of the death gets given meaning and given purpose, and it's a call to, to resist even more and to strive on. So the regime now has a great story to tell, right? This isn't a story of defeat from their perspective, right? It's the martyrdom of Ali Khamenei followed by the capitulation of the Americans. We survived to fight another day against the regime. They backed off. They stopped attacking us on day 40. Think of what religious significance this must have to these people, that they're getting bombarded, and it all comes to a crashing, well, not crashing, it all comes to a halt. The infidels stop attacking on day 40 after the death of Khamenei. And this is why I believe that the timing of the ceasefire was a strategic mistake. If they were paying attention to what these people actually believe, they would not have done this. Because if you're the United States, you have to understand that you're fighting a religious narrative. The way the regime will fall, or the way they will be defeated, is through through humiliation and defeat. You've just, by having this ceasefire go into effect right on or the day before the 40th day of Khamenei's death, feeds their religious narrative. Okay? You allowed the ceasefire, again, to land on top of the 40-day mark. And now the regime can look at that, and it just gives incredible significance. We endured, we resisted. After 40 days, just like Karbala, our sacrifice led to survival and triumph, and we can now continue to fight. This is incredibly powerful. This was a gift to the regime, because in 12 Shiism, the dominant ideology of the regime, the ideology of the regime, history, they don't view history as past events. They view history as this repeating template. So every struggle is mapped onto the past events. You hear this all the time from Muslims. This is not just Shiite Islam, it's also Sunni Islam, where they're always reading events that are going on they're mapping them onto these events from the early days of Islam. Okay, so every struggle for a Shiite is now Karbala. And every leader, especially the supreme leader, being killed, and then on the 40th day, the hostilities end, he becomes Hussein. Every enemy is the Yazid enemy, right? The illegitimate power that is trying to suppress us. So the 40-day cycle is a chance to see the current events as a repetition of that grand story. And so, and this goes beyond propaganda. Okay, this is much deeper. I can't stress it enough. It's a massive mistake by the Americans, and no one's talking about this. Please share this video, by the way, if you want to tell people what just happened here. And all you need to do is what I did. I read their media. We need to read. If you watch my channel, you know this. We need to follow the media of these other countries. Throughout this war, I read Iranian state media, I read Turkish state media, I read Saudi Arabian state media, Emirati media. You gotta see in their own language and in their own framing what they're saying. So what you have here is a fusion of this national mourning and political messaging mapped onto this historical consciousness of Karbala and Imam Hussein and the struggle against illegitimate powers, and it's all converging at this moment, and they're culturally primed to react to it in a way that, frankly, if you're the Americans or the Israelis, is not helpful, and that's why this is so important. This is what we're seeing here. This is not going to de-escalate the conflict, okay? It's not. It's going to set the stage for another round, because that's the real significance of the 40th day. Again, the 40th day is not about remembering or getting closure. It's about mobilizing based on the end of the initial mourning period and using it as an impetus to fight on. So yeah, there you go. That's why. So I believe, like I said, that there was a real miss here based on the ongoing problem. And this affects so many things in the Middle East, where Western powers, the United States in particular, but all Western powers, they make all their decisions. This is how they deal with Syria, how they deal with the Turks, how they deal with the Middle East, always pretends as though the religious beliefs, which are the primary motivating factor of all the bad actors in the Middle East, they pretend as though they're not relevant. It's baffling to me. In any event, there you go. That's what we're seeing here with the 40-day celebrations, or whatever you call them, the demonstrations, the 40-day demonstrations. And yeah, so like I said, I'm gonna make another video just about the ceasefire. So that should be coming up soon as well. Thanks for watching. Please tell people about this channel. Please share this video far and wide. This one's really important. Please share these videos. Tell people what we're doing on the channel, and please drop a comment. Let me know what you think of everything that I'm trying to do here. God bless you.